the press conference from Newgarden was it was a lot. It was more than I thought it was going to be. Scott McLaughlin and Will Power put out their statements that I feel like kind of you know shared their stance on the situation, summed it up pretty well. But Joseph, very, very emotional in that press conference. He had that one, particular line that's kind of going around where he went along and said, you call me all these things, but you don't call me a liar. And I think it could be one of those things. I mean, I guess I believe that Joseph was not like consciously like, I am going to do this to. I mean, well, I don't know. Maybe he was doing it to get an advantage, but I think the quote that sticks out, from the list you just read there, Scott Dixon, who was like, everyone did hybrid testing, not everyone did this. This was a Penske thing, and I think, yeah, it's awkward. It's awkward. That's the first emotion or thought that comes to my mind. It's just like awkwardness around it.
It's so awkward, especially considering Roger Penske owns the team, owns Indianapolis Motor Speedway, owns the series, and then his team does this. And it's been interesting because I hear folks saying, Roger is one of those team owners. They don't look at, cheating. They look at finding a competitive advantage. But the one thing I keep thinking about, this was not a gray area. This was simply, you don't use push to pass on the starts restarts. Joseph Newgarden, he used it. We all seen it. Is it one of those deals where just a force of habit? I feel like Panel War best said it too. He's been here in the series for 5 years. He knows the rules. I just find it very baffling that this occurred. We're, I think, happy to say that, IndyCar is addressing it and assuring to everyone there is a fair playing field, because now I think there's a lot of folks concerned, like, was there really an advantage for Penske, and how far back does it go? We know Jenna Fryer has shared some videos. One of them, Scott McLaughlin's lap in Portland, a race weekend he won, looked almost unbeatable that weekend. Now folks are curious about that race. And overall, I'm just sort of, I know before it seemed like nobody was talking about IndyCar. Now everybody's talking about IndyCar. Even some of the folks that would probably be following NASCAR. NASCAR's in Dover, not exactly the most thrilling track for the media. They're all going to Alabama. They are all talking to the drivers, getting the scoop. I have to ask this follow-up question to you, Jackson. We know in NASCAR, it's almost known that you're cheating, you're sort of trying, especially that gray rule. Well, this is no gray area. It's black and white. Joseph Newgarden say, okay, he takes responsibility. So does Scott McLaughlin. In a way, does this hurt IndyCar more than anything? Because they're getting more media attention, but it's for the wrong reason? Or do you think it could sort of develop into, okay, we got this feud. Newgarden essentially might be the Denny Hamlin, the heel of IndyCar. Do you think it can almost help IndyCar start to gain some attention?
I think, I guess, I hate to go through the lens of if in the for the sake of law and order and following the rules, I hate to go down the path of like a good team or bad team for this to happen to, but Team Penske is not the team that you would have picked for this to go down with. I mean, you have your defending Indy 500 champion, who is like your American marketing star for this series, all wrapped up in the Nashville stuff. 100 Days to Indy's coming out. He's featured as the defending Indy 500 champion. And he's sitting here at this press conference talking about how they cheated at the season opening race. Oh, by the way, his owner owns the track of the Indy car track. He owns the series. And it's just, if you put this situation, if this was like, Ganassi, or I mean, I guess Andretti would be a little different because that's a whole situation right now. But if this was like Andretti or, Ray Hollerman Lanigan or even like McLaren that was doing this, then it's like actually a legitimately interesting story. It was like, oh, what, let's get into the drama. What was going on? But since it's Newgarden, it's Penske, it is one of, I mean, it just makes it awkward, and it just throws another thing on the pile of like the doubts of like the Penske ownership of IndyCar, which like I wouldn't necessarily like put these things if this was happening, in a void. of like if IndyCar if the stocks were going up and this was just like something that happened, then it might also still be like an interesting, legitimate, cool, interesting story for IndyCar. But since the way that this year has started for IndyCar as a conglomerate, as a business, as an industry, this is just throwing it on the pile, and I think that's what really makes it kind of more of a negative and unfortunate story.
Yeah, I just don't see how, like you said, Joseph Newgarden is sort of the poster boy for Team Penske, American driver, very successful. I don't see how they could spin it as like, oh, he could be the heel of the series. It's like, no, you can't do that. He has, and they got the sponsorship level of Shell, which we know Shell is the official motor oil. PPG, they have all these sponsors that are so committed to IndyCar as a series, then Penske, and then you have teams who consolidate racing. No sponsorship really. I mean, you got new teams coming in. Prima. I'm really curious if this has altered their sort of okay. We're coming to IndyCar. You know, if you're coming to IndyCar, Penske, Ganassi, and Ray are going to be the top teams to beat. Is it now almost to the point where it's like, but will the playing field really be leveled, or will there be concerns of stuff like this? I know some folks have talked about the Indianapolis 500, how that went with the red flag and then the one lap shootout. I'm surprised that has not come up so much, including Marcus Ericsson, who said it was disappointing, thought it was a hacked account from the IndyCar when the news came out. It just really something else. And we know, of course, as we talked about, Roger Penske, IndyCar owner, team owner, Indianapolis Motor Speedway owner, biggest race, the 100 days of Indy on CWs. Does this really diminish people's trust in Roger Penske's ability to lead the series and the team?
I think, I mean, not, I don't think in the sense that in this particular incident. I think it's just like the series of incidents that we've been going through. Because I feel like my personal view on this is that like I still trust that like there's not it's there's not this conspiracy across through IndyCar to get Penske the best results. Like Chip Ganassi Racing would not be doing as well as they're doing if that was the action, if that was the big behind the scenes ploy. I think it's just the little things like the Indy 500. We're gonna really work really hard to make it under a green flag, and then oh gosh, that did hand Joseph the win, sort of. And oh, we're gonna have a penalty that we're not gonna discover for a month and a half. And oh, by the way, it's for the same team of the guy that was the series. So I think it's just those things. It's just like everything gets compounded because the owner of the series is also competing, and it's not that I have like a dis. I guess it's not a distrust. I guess it's just disappointment in how this stuff goes through. Because I mean, if this penalty was discovered the week of, if the infringement was discovered on the week of St. Pete, then I think that changes all these dynamics as well. It's just the way that everything kind of works out, and then it just takes an extra. There's always an extra like bullet point on the list for the fact that oh, by the way, he also owns the series.
Yeah, the fact that 45 days later this penalty comes out. Thermal Club, boy, I just feel like that event is sort of becoming more and more aging poorly because I think a lot of folks have been saying, well, if we had any event, especially a points paying event, this would have been issued earlier, assuming it was caught earlier rather than Long Beach, your next point race months later in April. I think for me, when it comes to Roger Penske, I think Roger himself, I don't think has the intention of monopolizing everything and trying to. He understands conflict of interest, but I just feel he might need to look into taking an additional step or something to assure the competitors, the teams, the fans, the sponsors, like, look, this is not who we are as a team, as an organization. IndyCar is fairly ensuring that everyone has an equal opportunity. What the teams do to try to gain that opportunity, you can't really regulate that. That's going to happen all the time. But the image that the team that Roger owns had this advantage, and people are questioning it. This was something Pat O'Ward said on frontstretch.com. He thinks there's more if you dive deeper into it, and we've seen the videos from Jennifer from 2022. Will that be a concern? Do you think that might be something, Jackson, where IndyCar is going to say, hey, we're going to look into what happened in 2022, 2023? And do you think that could be a concern of now they're really almost in a way changing the history books? Because we know F1 Moss is trying to do that. I think this is not a good route to go, and let's go back and start changing results from 2022 and maybe 2023.
Yeah, I think changing the result from a month ago is already bad enough. I think you got to leave previous years behind. I think you got to pay, I guess, particular attention to it now. Although at this point, because it's become such a public show that no one is going to attempt any sort of similar advantage. but yeah, I think going back more than this season feels like it may be a step too far. I mean, I don't. I mean, yeah, I think that would be a step too far. I think if it didn't get caught up in that moment. Although there were some quotes from people this week saying that they had seen this in the past and tried to raise concerns in the past, and those I guess got dismissed at the times. And maybe hopefully there's some file somewhere in some IndyCar drive with some documents on why it didn't end up becoming an issue. That I mean, if there's not that sitting around, then I guess maybe it is a concern and reason to go back. But I think changing results from previous seasons is really a no go for me.
Yeah, I don't like that idea either. It just opens up a plethora of issues, in my opinion, for trying to go back, correct something that, okay, somebody had an unfair advantage then, but then, I mean, you're changing race results, point standards, all this, and it's just too much. I mean, if this was, like you said, if they had found this out Monday or Tuesday after the race, I think more people would have been, oh, okay, but 45 days later, that is really something else.